you and your wife both have occasion to work at home at the same time, and sometimes that's not always the most comfortable situation to turn home into two separate working offices. There is something to be said for post-COVID. It's half a decade downstream from us. Get out the front door and go enjoy actual places with actual people, whether it's nature or it's a great pub or a restaurant like we're here at Pine Grove Hall. And of course, we should remind the audience that they can check out the chock-full event calendar, the seasonal menu, and book reservations at pinegrovehall.com or wherever. But don't get too obsessed with the notion of it's a state of mind. Place matters even in the most literal sense. Just getting out your front door and being out in the world with humans.
Well, boy, unpacking that you said everything's blurring together, the home, the work, and when I was mentioning third places, I didn't mention in the church was always a big third place, and just kind of the breakdown of a lot of institutional, traditional things. That's why I'm very excited to be a signal in the noise, and there's always a villain in every hero journey story. The villain to me is people on digital screens, because the breakdown of a lot of things is there's too much time on screen, and we want to activate people out of their house and into the third places in the real life and with real humans.
Now, I'm going to guess I know the answer to this question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Did you ever see The Never-Ending Story? It was like an 80s staple for kids who grew up in the 80s, which I understand is not you. You were only a child at heart during that decade, but you never saw The Never-Ending Story?
I did not.
Okay, all right. So the villain in that film is this thing called the Nothing. And it's just this big gray cloud that envelops and destroys everything. And so basically what you're saying is what Connect Happy Valley is doing is we are standing courageously in defiance of the nothing, this blob that is just consuming our lives and dooming us to, a future of endless scrolling nonsense versus getting out and enjoying the real world.
Well, what got me deeply into this business was a book called Bowling Alone.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
And as you know, my next book is going to be called Scrolling Alone. And I can't wait to author that, and so part of this laboratory of Connect Happy Valley is we want to activate people into what I think is the most meaningful part of life is human connection. Mm-hmm. And so yes, the big cloud is digital addiction, social media, and so a couple things at play here is I want to have local user-generated content. I want to engage local people and using kind of modern technology, but using digital to get people off digital. It's kind of paradoxical. We want to have one-click connection and activation into these third places and into groups and play, and just to drive that human connection.
And I don't want to jump around too much, but so we'll get into our bios and us interviewing each other as we go through the hour here. But so I'm on the board of the Mount Nittany Conservancy, and right now a big concern for us is what is going to happen with the former prison property at Rockview, and a lot of that is on Mount Nittany. So it's very relevant to my organization, and just as somebody who cares a lot about the area, relevant to me. And so I've been active in gathering together different community organizations that are concerned with this. And boy, Greg, have I been struck. I'm repeatedly reminded, even though I keep it at the front of my mind, I'm still surprised how many cool, talented people we have in this community. Like, I've gotten to meet people from the agricultural space and from the ecology space that it's just like, man, like these are worlds I would never travel in otherwise. And boy, they're sharp and talented and multifaceted, and they're all here in this little place where, as you said at the top of the show, you can drive 10 minutes and be in beautiful, bucolic country landscapes, or 7 weekends a year, you can go see a top 15 college football team in one of the 3 largest venues in the United States of America. You can go see Bruce Springsteen or Metallica or Paul McCartney on a random, winter or fall weekend. And you can go hear a Nobel laureate or a former president speak for free. It's just a really remarkable place. And going back to being able to remind everybody how fortunate we are to be here is just kind of the object of this program. Now let's keep up with our terminology lesson. You also used the term blue zone and how we put a nice little clever Penn State blue and white zone spin on it at Connect Happy Valley. Tell everybody what a blue zone is.
Well,
Because you think everyone knows this. They don't even know third place. They sure don't know blue zone.
Well, there's a famous book, probably has a podcast tied to it, of studying longevity. And certainly there's a big trend into longevity now. And again, maybe I look at always the Cliff Notes but it always comes back to friendship and relationships. Maybe I go seeking that out. But the blue zone, these pockets of the world where people have off the chart happiness and longevity and just radiate joy. An author goes out and studies that, puts research behind it, and boom, it's family, it's relationships, it's friendships, it's the depth of those, and then it's your purpose in life. And if your purpose, back to being the signal and the noise, is human connection, is love over fear, you live longer. Science has proven that. So as we're trying to be a signal in the noise, using YouTube, using the pipes that are available to us through social media and through our own mediums, ultimately we're trying to put a signal in the noise of longevity, happiness, radiating joy is tied to human connection and love. And I'm delighted this is our pilot show to be able to talk about what you call the slice of paradise, that sense of place, but to connect the people in that paradise. We're going to have the blue-white zone, and they're going to be writing books about the most connected community in this world.
Well, I believe truly there is something in the water, as they say, something in the air, something in the mountain. I got to get that in there on behalf of Mountain Nittany Conservancy. But there's a spirit to the place that I do truly, truly believe keeps you young. A lot of my wife, who is a Penn Stater herself and did as I did, stayed here in State College after graduation, friends of ours who see us only occasionally say, why do you guys always look the same? You look the same. And I just always tell them the same thing. It's living in Happy Valley. This morning, as I do practically every morning, as viewers of this program will certainly become well acquainted with, I began my day at the cheese shop on 324 Calder Way, enjoying some Mexican organic brewed up by Bill Clark, as he's been doing it for nearly 50 years now. And I ran into Tony Sapia, a longtime staple at downtown State College, and he had met earlier in the week, I guess over the weekend, my co-host in the obligatory pregame show, Kevin Horn. And Horn had showed him some picture of our cast from 10 years ago. And he said, wait, you look exactly the same. And I said, Tony. I said, it's living in Happy Valley. It keeps you young. Blue-white zone.
As you start rattling off characters in Happy Valley.
Disney characters, yes.
Explain what you mean by Disney costumed characters and that we're all just a costume character in the great story of Happy Valley.
So to the chagrin of some folks who live here, but I think none of those who possess the greatest store of wisdom, all of this wonderful stuff we just spent the first 20 minutes of this pilot show discussing is facilitated almost exclusively, in my opinion, by the presence of Penn State in the community. And so like it or lump it, there are 40,000 kind of long-term tourists. We hope some of whom will become permanent residents and many others will boomerang back to the area eventually. But a college in the 21st century in America has become something of a tourist attraction experience. And so years ago, I was talking to some parents of an undergrad at a football tailgate. They were just up visiting their kid for the weekend. And I was telling them a little bit about my life. And I could just tell by the way they were smiling and nodding their head that I said, that person probably went home and was talking to their friends that week and said, I was up to Penn State to visit Sally last weekend. And I'll tell you what, They do not cut any corners. They have every base covered. They actually had a young man there. He had his backstory down completely. He was telling me about how he had graduated and stayed in the area, and then he worked in a market research firm. And I really made it feel like I was in a town where people live and work. And so I said, I feel like we, the stalwarts of the Nittany Valley, are in some ways like the costumed characters that walk around Disney World. We're there to let the tourists feel like they are visiting a magical place that is inhabited 24/7, except it actually is. But I joke about how all the most recognizable names and faces are Disney characters, and Horn and I actually grade them A to F. You work your way up to A-tier Disney character status. I think you're like B flirting with an A. Bill Clark, Tony Sapia, easily like solid A's. I aspire to be a grade A Disney character one day.
Well, since you mentioned Tony Sapia, why is he an A costume character here in Happy Valley? Because he is.
The answer is self-evident. I mean, you got the family roots. Long-time business owner.
Talk about the family roots. You have to talk about the family.
So Jack Sapia was his dad. Near and dear to my heart because of Italian descent. So love the Sapia family. And his boys operated businesses right in downtown State College. Multi-generations, put kids through the schools here and have stayed in the community and been part of the entrepreneurial spirit of State College. And they're characters in every sense of the word.
Well, and since nostalgia and some of these old, certainly Shady Gaff is owned by a Sapia.
Yeah, by Mark, Tony's brother.
And what did Jack own when he was here?
The
real estate is still in the family.
Yeah, yep.
It was the My Oh My, and
yes, of which I've heard stories.
Well, and that's the beauty of the feelings and emotions we have for Happy Valley. And you mentioned Disney, and I always say we're Disney World North, and I always consider Disney World manufactured fun. I think we're real life fun.
Organic fun.
We're purposeful fun. It's natural, it's organic. It's certainly used the word bucolic. That's why if you look at the product of Happy Valley and why we're sitting on a stage at Pine Grove Hall, as a marketing guy, I study marketing, teach it a little bit at Penn State. The product of Happy Valley, product, price, place, promotion, the 4 Ps. I'll put our product against any product, including Disney World, including cruises, including the Mediterranean. We wouldn't be here if we didn't believe that this is truly, and maybe that's a slice of paradise, but at the roots of it, there are roots that are really special. You use the word magical.
And they run deep. And you and I have both made calculated, intentional choices to pass up money, to pass up opportunities, to pass up job titles, to live in a place that we love. And man, I do not regret it a single day because I wake up every morning in a place I love living. And to me, I almost can't put a dollar figure on that, although unfortunately I've been forced to basically do so at moments. But you talked about your background as a marketer, as somebody who teaches entrepreneurship. I think this is a great time to pivot into introducing ourselves a little bit to the audience. We're going to interview each other about each other. And let's start with entrepreneurship, Woodman, which is a big part of your identity. And I think it's appropriate that we are today creating a minimum viable product with this show, are we not?
Well, again, just getting ready for this first debut live show. Just driving right through campus. I drove purposely through campus and then came down College Avenue out here.
To get in the spirit of it. I love that.
Well, spirit,
I love it.
Minimal viable product. But I had to reflect upon, I've been here, next year will be 50 years, and I came here in 1976. And to think about, and you mentioned anxiety, resilience, the New York Times article, and as you know, everybody's booing these commencement speeches on AI. So we're in this tumult time of another technological revolution, and everybody's booing commencement speakers when they use the word AI. So resilience is very important in in this inflection points in technological change. But the thing that I'm most fascinated by from 76 to today is that when I came here, certainly there was no internet. There was no fax machines. And now I'm sitting here 50 years later, and we're beaming this show globally through YouTube. And my son in Scottsdale, Arizona, with my grandson are watching it. We have maybe one viewer. But just think about how,
the longest journey starts with the first step, Greg.
Yeah, so I stepped on this campus in the winter. I started in the trimester days in winter, put in one of those what do they call that housing where you're in the common area?
Oh, supplemental housing. You got put in one of the study halls with some cots dragged into it?
Yes, in Tenor Hall, East Halls, in the middle of winter. And I think it was the coldest winter on history of mankind.
Hey, look, we threw a mattress into a study hall, and now it's a dorm room.
So I lived in there for a month. But anyway, so 50 years later, I'm sitting here talking to you about why we love Happy Valley, and it's being beamed. You know, back then you would have to have an FCC license for radio. You'd have to have a TV. You'd be part of like a 3 networks. I'm just saying, I'm amazed that in essence, we're here sharing the feelings and emotions we have for this area, and it was built over my 50 years. And yes, going back to entrepreneurship, I came here, immediately fell in love with actually the infrastructure, the IM building, the IM fields, tennis courts everywhere. I mean, I was saying pinch me when I first moved here because I was in pickup basketball games like any night of the week. And the dining halls were like being on a cruise ship. That endless food, unlimited food, creamery ice cream, fresh milk that was in a cow that seemingly the day before. I just was amazed. So 50 years later, you can maybe ask questions, but I've been a costume character. When I'm at tailgates, just to jump to the punchline, people were always fascinated that in 1984 I came out with a cardboard figure of Coach Joe Paterno.
That's where I was going to go first.
Well, so that's the definitive moment of a young student entrepreneur that just quickly, when I was selling T-shirts in the tailgates, and I teach this in a class, I taught it at Airwalk. If you stay close to your customer, if you get into their hearts and you talk to them, you have superpowers. And my superpower were developed as an 18-year-old in tailgates here at Penn State, and it's no coincidence that 50 years later, Connect Happy Valley is really a tailgate. It is just a digital tailgate, and we're inviting people in, and everybody bring a dish, and we're just going to BS for 4 hours, maybe go to the game, maybe not. After the game, we're going to come back and have a few beers. I mean, this is just a digital tailgate. But I fell in love with the feelings and emotions. These people talked to me. I'd barter my shirts for a beer and food. They told me what they wanted. They wanted this kind of shirt. They wanted this kind of bumper sticker. So I've just been a one-trick pony. You listen to your market and you serve it up. And if they vote with their dollars, you stay in business. If they don't, you sell your furniture and move down the street.
And there you go. Well, you said a mouthful there. You revealed a lot about yourself just in the oblique references you made. Before I come back to that, I do just want to stay on the tailgate theme for a moment. Back in 2005, which was a great football season for Penn State, they had been in a bit of a slump for 5 years, 4 losing seasons over that time. Unheard of for Joe and unheard of for the program. And the program just comes roaring back in 05 and wins the Big Ten title. The team finishes number 3 in the nation. Beat Bobby Bowden and Florida State in the Orange Bowl. And as that fall is going on, that magical fall is happening, Sports Illustrated, which was much bigger back then because magazines existed, was doing a national bracket of tailgating, college versus NFL. And Penn State, in the midst of its football renaissance, was just blasting through this competition like a buzzsaw, got all the way to the finals, faced and defeated Buffalo and the Bills fans in the finals. And it was all being kind of fronted by this guy who was a chef from New Orleans named Joe Cohn. And he had dubbed himself the National Commissioner of Tailgating. And all this guy did was go around the country and go to different college and professional tailgates and document the the lifestyle, the culture of tailgating in America. And I interviewed him several years ago about that competition and just about his view on life and what he did and how he gave himself that job and that title. And he kept coming back to this theme that he called tailgates the last great American neighborhood. And he talked about each tailgating spot as a backyard without fences separating them, and how neighbors would talk and encounter each other and learn each other's stories and bond over good food and a couple of adult bevs. If you're of age, of course, I wouldn't want to encourage any illegal behavior here on Pilot Episode 0.0. But I thought that great American neighborhood, that always resonated with me. That stuck with me from that interview it's probably 10 years ago that I did it, and I'm still here talking about it. And to talk about what you do with Connect Happy Valley and everything you've done, we're going to get back to that and a little bit what I do as well. I think we're both just trying to bring the spirit of a tailgate to celebrating Happy Valley and sense of place.
Well, that's the creative brief. You nailed it. When I was at Airwalk, we spent all our time on creative briefs. I studied the Nike creative briefs. We just nailed the Connect Happy Valley creative brief. It is a digital tailgate, and it just reminds me, I almost get tingly when you talk about that chef. My most successful product was back in my sophomore year here at Penn State. I came out with a T-shirt, Penn State National Tailgate Champions, and it had a Nittany lion embracing a keg. And I went around as an 18-year-old to all the distributors of beer seeking a sponsor to put their logo on that keg. And I got Stroh's to give me a quarter a shirt. And Mr. Smith was the guy who was the Stroh rep out of South Hills of Pittsburgh. He met me over at Nittany Beverage. You're in, you're out. The only slogan in a lingo that has urine in it, tied to a brewery. But I went to Nittany Beverage. Remember their slogan? You're in, you're out at Nittany Beverage. And so I got my first sponsor for a keg. And to think about it, kegs eventually got outlawed in the fraternities. But,
right.
But that shirt,
in retrospect, maybe not a great move.
I think they're bringing them back because it was actually a good thing. Anyway, but so I sold that shirt for 5 years, and even after I left Penn State for a while, I forwarded it down to my fraternity brothers who sold it, and that was their most successful shirt. And, so getting back to launching Connect Happy Valley, I just think about 3 years ago, I decided to take an inventory of my career and where did I have my most fun? Where was I the most effective? And darn it, was back bidding into Connect Happy Valley, back to tailgating. What's the digital version of that today? YouTube. These two-sided network effect platforms like social media and Facebook. And I just wanted to do it local, in real life, local, because social media globally has fragmented and has stripped us of our daily newspaper, and we lost our signal. So all of those things are kind of tied into tailgating, creative brief, execution. We're on a stage talking to you.
And so you've mentioned Airwalk a few times, and only in passing, I think we do need to pause and talk about that a little bit. Again, I talked about being an 80s kid, so that meant I was 90s teenager. So, of course, I knew the brand Airwalk, an Altoona-based company, which I don't think a lot of people remember or even know. But at one time, one of the coolest national, even international footwear brands, hottest in the 1990s. And who got it there? A former Penn State kid and Pennsylvania Young Entrepreneur of the Year named Greg Woodman, my co-host here on Connect Happy Valley A.M. And you talked about how back in that day you would have needed an FCC license. Now, finally, Greg, that the barrier to entry is virtually zero, we can have a show like this. So, go.
Well, just to talk about Airwalk, since I had about a decade of doing novelty products for Penn State and magazines, and I started a business journal, and I learned through these special feelings and emotions that people needed not only T-shirts, they needed posters, they needed bumper stickers, they also needed magazines. And we won the 82 championship, so I came out with a national championship magazine. It's all printing, it's all words on paper, it's all design, paper, printing, distribution, content plus distribution. So anyway, this guy in Airwalk owns this $16 million brand in Altoona, working out of a strip mall next to the Ultimate Bagel Shop.
Amazing.
He had a storefront because he owned a little shopping strip mall. There was a day-old bread place, the Ultimate Bagel in the Meadows. So he puts the signal out like,
To be clear, the ice cream meadows.
The Meadows, yes, right. And so he puts the word out to his business people here in State College. I need a marketing guy. I got this $16 million brand through somebody recommends where there's a guy named Woodman who does these goofy, crazy products. And I did get some accolades like Entrepreneur of the Year. And I had a penchant for getting press because I was always doing borderline racy posters and twins posters and, So I meet this guy.
The Twins poster, again,
Right.
just for people who don't catch the reference, we'll probably have one on the set at some point. Just two easy on the eyes young co-eds who agreed to be photographed sitting on top of the Nittany Lion Shrine, clothed, but not entirely.
Well, they were twins.
Yes.
Identical twins.
Well, I figured,
twins equal Nittany Lion,
I
equal
figured
special
that was
feelings and
implicit
emotions.
in calling it the Twins poster.
Yes,
But yes,
yes,
go on.
big hit poster. And I did a Are You a Penn Stater guidebook. But anyway, this guy is a Penn State alum. He meets me at Damon's. Remember Damon's?
I do.
He goes, hey.
Happy Valley Live now, another great spot here in the Valley.
So he meets me. I'm doing the Business Journal at the time. And he goes, hey, do you want to consult for me? And I never heard of Airwalk. So I started consulting with him week to week, and he has an office out in San Diego. One thing led to another, and we went from 16 million to 200 million in 4 years. And it was just a global dopamine, adrenaline-filled 5-6 years of my life. And we started here. The whole thing is he sold shoes at the beach only. West Coast, East Coast. It was a surf brand, it's a skate brand. And he goes, Woodman, can you open distribution? And I said, well, let's try it here in Pennsylvania. So I went to downtown State College and opened up the Rude Boys, called on Art Fine. He did not buy from me at the time, which I tease him about. And he actually
Big mistake. He would have made a lot of money.
Well, the joke with Art, when we get back together, is I said, I called you, Art, and I said, should I take this consulting job? And you said, don't take the consulting job. Woodman, you know nothing about shoes. You do cardboard figures. I'm the shoe guy. Don't take that job. And then we went from 16 to 200 million. I always tease him about that. But we opened up the Rude Boys. We opened up a couple other stores in State College. Then we went up to Clearfield. Then we went to Du Bois. Then we went to Danville. And I just started taking shoes around. And so I learned footwear. And I also knew direct marketing. So anything, we started here in Pennsylvania. We opened up distribution all over the state. And a little tip on how we did it. We'd go get phone books and rip out the page that had shoe stores. And we put it in a database, and we start sending letters to these places, and we drip, because I had done that in publishing, and then we get an opening, we put some shoes in, put them in on consignment, make sure they sold, sell in, sell through. And then we went to Tennessee was our next state. And then we said, this works. And then we went state by state. It became like we had maps all over of how we were going to go state by state to open up distribution. And we did that first around the United States, then we hired reps, independent sales reps, and then we went to Canada, then we went to Mexico, then we went to South America, and then we went around the world. And, my job was, I eventually quickly became full-time, sold my business journal, and then lived on a plane, opened up distribution. I just smile become all the stories of opening up Australia, and it was a global brand, and we became like the second or third coolest brand in America because we were in the action sports. We hit the wave perfectly. The X Games came about. We had
Super
Tony
Bowl
Hawk
commercial.
We
you
did-
guys used
well-
to advertise during Beavis and Butthead. Trust me, 9th, 10th grader in the mid-1990s. I was watching those commercials, no doubt.
As soon as we had distribution all laid out around the world, then we went and sold it through with Beavis and Butthead. And we 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, we had a 30-second spot. Things just lit up. Then we put an 8-page insert in the Sports Illustrated. Just a lot of fun.
So what I love about that, other than you just telling a good story, it's interesting to me as somebody who likes to learn about marketing, who remembers Airwalk. To get back to the theme of Connect Happy Valley and of this program, Connect Happy Valley A.M., which will air live here on the Connect Happy Valley YouTube channel, 9 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday from Pine Grove Hall in Pine Grove Mills, is that here you are, a kid who moved around a lot as a young man, ended up in Upper St. Clair outside Pittsburgh, went to Penn State, flagship, land-grant university of your home state, and in and outside of the classroom, you picked up skills and you learned lessons that put you on a path that ultimately had you transforming a $16 million company in Altoona into a $200+ million international brand, and then ultimately boomeranged back to stay to become part of the State College Happy Valley community. And we've got, as I alluded to earlier, an innumerable amount of people who have equally fascinating stories, who are drawn into this community, often sent out into the world, and some inexorably pulled back to again contribute to the fabric of what it is, the unique alchemy of this place. And that's what this show is all about. It's going to be about surfacing those stories so people can encounter them in an interesting, authentic way and make them part of their own sense of, I live in a really cool place. Pinch me, I'm in Happy Valley.
Well, that brings me back to Airwalk was sold to private equity, and it was run by some University of Virginia young guys who came in, I'll never forget, and they said, hey, now that we own it, I think we should move to a cool part of the world to be tied to this global brand that is so cool. And so they voted, where are we going to move Airwalk to? They voted to move to Golden, Colorado, because that's snowboarding, and that's the gold in Colorado. And I'll remember that vote. And, and I went home and said, I'm not going. I'm staying, And so they moved, all the trucks and everything moved to Golden, Colorado. But I was against that because we had Woodward Skate Camp up there. We had our little Tussey Mountain right there where we were testing boots. I mean, it was the greatest, well, I can say that over and over, the greatest place to live, work, and play. And we were so close to New York City.
Please say it over and over.
Where Foot Locker was. And we had, Dick's Sporting Goods in Pittsburgh. It was a bad move. And sure enough, this private equity company took Airwalk into bankruptcy within 3 years of ownership. Just because they wanted to go back to the core of, we had already gone mainstream. We were 200 million. I just have to grind this axe. We were a $200 million company. Vans was 110. Skechers was 80. Skechers is 10 billion today. Vans is 4 billion. And little Airwalk is just dribbling along at authentic brands tied with a bunch of other 90s brands that have not yet made it.
And when you say, by the way, LA Gear, right? Another one I remember. But when you say authentic brands, that's actually the name of the company.
The name of the company.
Describing the brands.
There is a company that's trying to go public in a year. They have bought up like Brooks Brothers, Airwalk, Sports Illustrated, Muhammad Ali, Marilyn Monroe. They're a collection. I go to their website just to, I want to license back Airwalk, when I'm having a little too much caffeine.
Yeah, sure.
Because, as you know, I have files and files from all of the marketing
I
in the 90s.
am well aware of all your files.
And I'm just saying
yes.
It would be so easy because the value of a brand is what lives in the hearts and minds of its audience. And I do think that brand, anyway, I could go on, and my poor students in my class at Penn State have to hear these stories.
You teach entrepreneurship at Penn State now.
I teach Engineering 310, which is entrepreneurial leadership. And I got involved with that because I was a frequent guest speaker in these classes. And they finally said, you get so excited. The kids seem to connect. They love these stories. You were an authentic student entrepreneur. This is about teaching student entrepreneurship. So I've been teaching since 2007 as an adjunct, 1 or 2 sections every semester. And it's a blast, mainly because I stay connected to these costume characters called students who roam about, 40,000 of them, and they are fascinating.
Doing anything like that, I find to be incredibly rewarding. Number one, because you feel like you're giving back to alma mater a little bit. But number two, just being able to go and interact with today's undergrads. I think one of the reasons, of several, that I have never, even by osmosis, internalized any of the cynicism and frankly, in some circles, contempt that some of my beloved friends and neighbors here in the Nittany Valley have for the undergraduate population is that not just that I remember what it was to be one and to be so grateful to have been drawn to this place I love so much by Penn State, but because I actually interact with them. I am just reminded that going back to Socrates and before, everybody always believed that the upcoming generation was useless and that theirs was the last one of any merit. and it's nonsense. So look, I think folks at Penn State would probably self-immolate before they'd let me teach a class up there, but they do let me and Mike the mailman in to talk to the podcasting class once a semester, which I love doing. And I listen to you talk about being able to interact with your students. And I'm certainly not envious of the amount of work or the paycheck, but I'm envious of that time you spend with the undergrads.
Oh, it's great. But hey, enough of me, Chris. Tell us who you are.
Let's save that for tomorrow.
We're
miraculously running out of time on the show, even though there's no breaks. Because this is pilot episode 0.0.
We have 10 minutes, and since this is our pilot show, and we all love to watch the Seinfeld pilot,
you're 50%.
Tell us.
Go ahead.
Of who you are and why you're here, and what's the purpose this is bringing you.
Okay. Well, it was barely a question, just sort of an open-ended invitation for me to talk. So thanks so much for the guidance.
I'm not a trained on-air personality yet. Go ahead.
So as I alluded to, it was Penn State that brought me to Happy Valley. I was freshman, summer, 1997. By the way, summer semester, the only way to fly, the best way to encounter this place, the best way to onboard from high school to college, especially going from a small rural part of the state, which is where I came from in Carbon County, where I had 150 kids in my graduating class, to a campus that was about to have 40,000 kids on it, to be up here with only 5 or 6, and all of them freshmen, all of them making that same transition. I mean, just no better way to do it. And probably ideal circumstances to begin to fall head over heels in love with the place. And, by grit, determination, and a whole lot of luck, and a whole lot of love, I never left. And I've been fortunate enough to be here in the community, to wear a lot of different hats. As I said, if there's anything ultimately that drives me, what I have a passion for, other than loving my family, and I said my wife's a Penn Stater. She works for the university. Our daughter is about to start at State High this fall. It's putting down roots in a place, becoming part of a community of space and time, and doing what I can to give back by leaving it better than I found it. I always try to be involved in some sort of philanthropic effort. I've served I was one of the founding directors and president for a few years of the State College School District Education Foundation. I'm currently vice president of the Mount Nittany Conservancy, done philanthropic work, raising money for Penn State. I always used to tease Paul Clifford, the previous Alumni Association CEO, that they started making alumni interest group board members become Alumni Association members. Now, I'm a big fan of the Penn State Alumni Association. I encourage every grad to join, largest dues-paying alumni association in the world. But I was never a member of the Alumni Association. I think this is my whole life. People join that to stay connected to Penn State. I occasionally take a break from being connected to Penn State, but I was on the student media radio alumni board, and they started making us join the Alumni Association. So I'm glad I did it, so I get the magazine. Now I'm a life member. But I always used to tease Paul and say, you guys are making us pay you so we can then go out and raise money for you for free. But I've helped raise a couple of scholarships for student broadcasters at Penn State. I was involved through the Mount Nittany Conservancy with helping in the launch of a 3-credit course in the history department, teaching the history of Penn State. We're one of only 2 institutions in the Big Ten that has such a course, ironically the other one being where Paul is now head of the Alumni Association at Indiana University. And I mentioned I was part of the student media AIG. When I was a student at Penn State, what really gave me my out-of-classroom experience, formative not just to my Penn State experience, but my life in so many ways, was being part of the student radio station. And so I always had this passion for media and for sports. And shockingly to me, still over a decade ago, I got an opportunity to sit on a back porch for a very similar, very rough, very make it up as you go along pilot 0.0 Penn State football pregame show, which became known as the obligatory pregame show. And it was myself and my very dear friend Kevin Horn, who was managing editor of Onward State when he was here and helped grow that brand into the largest independent student media outlet in America. Another thing we can brag about having here in Happy Valley, and a former all-conference defensive tackle, 10-year NFL vet, Brandon Noble, and Mike the Mailman, a truly unique, beloved campus icon here at Penn State, who we're going to have as a guest, maybe a frequent guest here on this show. And that's been a big part of my life and my identity for people in this local community and the distributed Penn State community ever since, which is, 25% of the obligatory pregame show and podcast. So it's been a fun ride and a very unique journey, and I could not be more grateful for all of it, up to and including this morning here at Pine Grove Hall.
And so 10 years ago, the obligatory pregame tailgate show started.
Yes, and that's my tailgate.
That's your tailgate.
Yeah.
And you've broadcast that throughout the state, throughout the country. Now it's a podcast, and it's very, very popular. And describe that 10-year journey. Inexplicably, but hey, it's getting back to this theme of tailgating in the obligatory pregame tailgate show, where a former Penn State player, Mike the Mailman, who is certainly a costume Disney character.
No doubt. And Mike is A+ tier Disney character.
He's A++, off the charts.
Yeah.
And so you've been at this for 10 years in media, distributing it at one point through PCN.
So long we replaced Noble with Tengwall now. Like, we've had another generation of Penn State football players.
And so you have that show, and it's a podcast. It's on YouTube also. Highly recommended. I watch it. And now we have this show. Is there room for more noise in this market? Are we the signal? Are you the signal? Like, what are we doing?
I hope so. One thing, as I've discussed with you, that I learned, the YouTube channel where the show appears now, because it has been around long enough that it went from old media distributed via cable television networks to YouTube, where it's thriving and we're having the most success we've ever had. We were on a channel called For the Bloggy, which is now the Tengwall Film Network. Very glad to be working with Landon on that. Really cool partnership. But where I kind of got my in on For the Bloggy was started by another Penn State alum, former Daily Collegian guy, and he and I both have this great affection for the written word. And so he just loved the prestige of being able to publish a 3,000 or 4,000 word Friday morning pregame football column that I would write. And we both loved that column. Problem was, it wasn't making any money because consumers don't read anymore. They're like, just give it to me in my earlobes and occasionally to my eyeballs, podcasts, YouTube. And so is there room in the market for more noise? Probably not. But is it possible to, with love in your heart and dedication to your craft, create an authentic, appealing signal that cuts through the endless sea of noise? Yeah, I hope so, because here we are.
And as we jump into this TV, we also are launching an app. We're going to have a website. We're going to have a print publication that's going to be distributed in the hotels.
Because you and I are just stubbornly committed to it. It still works in this market. I don't know. I can't explain it. I can't explain a lot of mysterious things about Happy Valley, and the persistence of print here is one of them.
Yes. And so I always look at, we're trying to create a pneumatic tube from our heart to your heart, into your heart, into these third places, and into this tailgate environment of Happy Valley. And so we're going to be having all these arrows trying to fire Cupid-like into your heart. And we think there's a product here, certainly Happy Valley, and we think we have the ability to connect, and that's what we're trying to do. Ultimately, thus the name. And it's a heavy lift. Using, like you call, old media, new media. We're going to try to find you where you are, meet you where you are, and serve up this slice of paradise. And the ultimate metric would be, what would success look like, Chris, if our arrows are connecting? Heart to heart.
Well, obviously, we'll pump up the vanity metrics that you love to track, like clicks and viewership and time spent viewing and all that stuff I love to ponder over when I'm looking at the obligatory stats. But ultimately, to me, the mission is very clear. Teach the people of this place to love it better, and get the people who might want to come experience it for a day or for a lifetime intrigued enough that they make the journey.
And we want to activate them, and we want to bring joy and bring joy and connect people to third places and to each other. And to me, that is the hallmark and the meaning and the ultimate metric if we do that.
So pilot episode in the books, no breaks, Woodman, the easiest hour of your day. It's Connect Happy Valley A.M. It is now official. The minimum viable product is on the shelf. We're here at Pine Grove Hall. We're on the Connect Happy Valley YouTube channel. ConnectHappyValley.com is where you can go to read some excellent stories about the future of higher education and how it's relevant to this community today, and sign up for their weekly newsletter to get that in your inbox every Wednesday morning. Pine Grove Hall and PineGroveHall.com is where you can come to hear great live music and experience great food in a unique, character-filled atmosphere in wonderful Pine Grove Mills. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. here on the Connect Happy Valley YouTube channel is where you can hear these two dopes, Greg Woodman, I'm Chris Buchignani, continue to bring you your little slice of paradise. Until then, have a wonderful day, and don't mind me clicking the end stream button right now.
There we go.
Nope, not yet.
Oh, we're still live.